So let's continue to look at some of these files. Now there are a lot, so I think you can take this a little bit slower than you might take some of the other sections because it deals with a lot of data. And again, you might want to really concentrate on working with the phpMyAdmin. Get familiar with it. You can put your SQL statements in. You can start to type things in here, but I do recommend you go over the statements like I mentioned, select, insert, delete, and update. But we'll continue and go through the motions here. You can also look at the source code in this particular folder. When you actually look and set up your phpMyAdmin, you can see how the author of this software did it, and it's really robust, and I think you're going to enjoy going through that information and seeing the details. In any event, we can continue. Now, when we want to actually edit something, we've already talked about working with the inserting. When you edit something, you can see that in this edit file we have a selection that's going to take place. I'll take a peek at the file again just to show you. We can click here and we'll list all customers. So we're listing all the customers and we just hit edit. Well, you can see we can edit things. This should actually be read only the customer ID, and when you update, that's going to send this form out. These are just echoed out as we've seen and we'll see in the form section. And if you update, this is going to call that edit page from here. It's just going to echo out and say, this is what you edited. This is the way it's going to look now. And if you look at the edit file, and you can see that this is an update actually. The edit file is going to look like this. And that's it says update, but we're actually editing it. And you can see that it's going to let us know whether or not it found a row there. Because when you click on the edit, it has to do something to actually select those fields that we saw there in that edit. We can just hit back here. You see the fields were filled out when we went in. I showed you how to use the session to do this effectively, but there is a query that's selected here. And if we look at the query string here, for this, we would see that there is a particular ID that's going to be sent in, the customer ID field. We can take a peek here and just hold the mouse over and look down on the status. You're going to see that we pass a field there. We'll see this in the form section, but just to give you an idea, customer ID field is going to be passed with the number 1. That's the ID in the database, and that's what's going to get sent here. So if you want, we can actually open this in a new window. And you see this is the query string up here. That's what's going to actually get sent to this page. And that is why the data is there. So we look at it and you see that we have a select statement here. Again, very basic. It's just selecting star all the fields from the customer table. Now you can just get by with just using star. Bring back everything. Bring back all the columns and then just use the ones that you want. But that can get into the larger size data when you actually deal with a lot of fields, a lot of columns. So in the beginning when you're just planning things out, you might do select star. But to be optimized, you would just list comma separated the fields that you need specifically. That's going to be when you're ready to optimize your code. Be sure to include the table. And here we have a where clause. This is going to let us have a more selective approach with this statement. So we're going to go after only where the customer ID, the database field customer ID, is going to be equal to that variable, which is 1 in our case, and that's going to be this customer ID. We could actually put that there without using a variable if we wanted to. We're just requesting it. We're not worrying about SQL injection or anything like that. We're just going to add it in the fields here, just to demonstrate that this is what we're doing. And then we're just going to use the MySQL result, pass in the result because we actually connect to the database again. We send that query there using the DB connection. We use the result from that MySQL query. We can get the number of rows here into a variable from MySQL underscore number of rows, num rows, with result, which is the handle to our query here, our query results, and that's what we pass in there. And that's going to return the number of rows. And then we can check if the number of rows is equal to 0. If it is, then we say no rows found. Else, we're going to see if the number of rows are greater than 0, because we want to be specific in case we get a negative number there. And then we're just going to set our I counter to 0 if we need it. And that's going to be the first row, the 0 row, and that's where you're going to see that there. And that's going to allow us to, in this format, from the result, the query that we have results for, 0 would be that row, and then we're going to take the customer ID, first name, etc. for each of those fields and put them into variables here. And I is going to equal 0 when we know that we only have one row, but there is the possibility that we're going to have greater than one row returned if there are duplicate customer IDs. But on the database side, you can actually limit that so you don't have to worry about multiple IDs, and oftentimes you should code for that, to check for that, to make sure you don't have duplicates, because you really can't show it on that page. And if there happens to be duplicates, you're never going to see it unless you list things out, and you really want to have some robust database checking. But you can get by with this. You don't have to be so specific as long as you know your data is going to be right. That's important to keep in mind. Just a few tips. And then we just echo out all the fields and we're all set. When we update, we're going to go to that update page and update the database. We'll take a peek at that. So we send all those fields. We do add / again, just because we're just doing it here and there. And then we use an update query. The update query is going to look for a particular row, and it's going to set values based on a condition. And that condition, after we go all the way to the edge here, will make it easier because, like I said, this is generated code. Robust, but generated code. We're still going to have a where clause like we had with the select statement, but you can see that this is updating. Updating customers. We're not inserting to or selecting from or just selecting. We're actually setting. So it has different syntax. You just have to get used to it. The insert uses 2 different lines with parentheses, and that's the way it looks. It's looking like that for years, and it could definitely be a lot easier. Really could be a lot easier. PHP does some things in the background that we don't necessarily have to look at in the hardest way. It does it in a very hard way in the background. We don't see it. Well, at this point, SQL should be that way, but it is a little bit cryptic. People really like SQL, actually. I really think it's more job security because it's a little bit confusing to look at. But once you get used to it, you'll get into it. You get into data for a little bit, but it doesn't stay exciting, or maybe it does for you, but you definitely can get into how databases work, and it can be very, very, very interesting. I did that for quite some time, and I really did enjoy it. But anyway, what you do is you set this time. You're setting something. So you're setting a customer ID, for example, and then you put in quotes the variable, like a key value pair, comma separated. And it could look like similar things when we're dealing with arrays, for example. Similar. And then we have the first name field, etc., for all the fields that we want to actually update here across the way. Now I'll leave it on one line, but you can make multiple lines. It's up to you. But we're going to update everything that we have a form field for, and that's how we update things. Call that query again. Make sure you look at the include file if you're not sure how that works. We've talked about the connection. We're including once, just one file. Check out the include videos for more information, but definitely take a peek in there. After we do the update query, we're not really worried about errors and things like that. Oftentimes, when you do an update, you really should check to see if it's going to have errors and do some robust checking, as I've mentioned. But in this case, we leave that for another day, and we just worry about echoing out what is updated. And then you can see the other links to do and see the other parts of this section. Now we have delete in the delete file. Delete is going to use delete from. Delete from customers. Be very careful. You can delete everything in your customers table if you don't include a where clause. SQL is very, very, very unforgiving. It just is extremely unforgiving. You can mess up your whole database in just a couple of lines there. That's why it's important to actually protect your code to make sure people aren't going to be able to affect it. Because not only can they see what your data is, they can actually put in extra code there to actually delete your records, grab credit card information, all types of nasty little things that people can do. And it can really just ruin your business. So you just want to keep note of it. And I suggest definitely looking at advanced information on protecting the code from SQL injection and also just hacking in general. But we add these slashes in the name of protection, and we grab the post variable here. We'll see that later, not just the request, which is just not post or get, but it's just a way to grab that, and we'll see that. And the field that we're looking for, because this is what's passed in, and that's what we're going to delete, just that field, just that customer ID. And you can see and look at the other parts of this file and understand different things that you can do there. But that's a delete. There's also a delete confirm, and you can look through the code and see and make sure that certain JavaScript's going to be executed before things just get deleted. Viewing is just doing a select, not a big change there. Doing very similar things to what we've seen, so you can take a peek at that. And the grids we'll also take a look at. And there's a list that we can peek at in another video. This is the confirm delete, just to make sure. And it does do something a little bit different, but it's not different than what we're used to. It's selecting the information first, and we're going to confirm a deletion before we delete.